And I'd love to start with a quote from you. You said something like, I just finished my 10th marathon, and you said it makes you smile every time you read that sentence. Because if you had told the Emily of 2003 that you'd even run a single marathon, the Emily of 2003 would have told you you're essentially crazy. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I was active, but not super active. I played soccer coming of age. It was big in my hometown. But by the time I made it to high school, after playing on the volleyball team my freshman year, I didn't make the JV squad because I couldn't run a mile in under 10 minutes. And that unfortunate arbitrary benchmark dissuaded me from not only running, but a lot of activity for the next 4 years. That decision not to be a part of the JV volleyball team was something that really impacted me and changed how I went about everything in my teenage years, candidly. And so in 2003, which would have been a bit preceding this, I just was not the kind of kid that had the stamina or interest to do something like that.
Wow. And so do you think that moment kind of shaped you back then for what was to come for the years to follow because of the fact that you kind of quit when things didn't go your way or when things went hard? Or was it just such a self-esteem thing that led you down a path of more unhealthy habits?
Yeah, candidly, it was someone else's decision, right? That prevented me from doing the thing that brought me so much joy. And instead of having the understanding that I have now, which is that when things don't go your way, that doesn't mean that there aren't other options. There aren't other avenues that can bring you joy in the same capacity, that I have other opportunities to move my body. These days, this feels really applicable when we talk about injury, navigating some foot tendonitis recently. I didn't give up on movement altogether. I have the understanding that this just means that it's time for a shift, right? So instead of maybe something that would be my go-to, like running, I just spent the last part of a month or so cycling, and it was so enjoyable. And so at that time, freshman, sophomore in high school, I certainly didn't have the understanding that just because one door closed didn't mean that I could open another and find that same endorphin rush that I would get from playing volleyball. Instead, I leaned into other pursuits because I, at that time, felt as though athletically, it just wasn't an option for me. So I got into musical theater. I got into a local youth group and really did enjoy my time doing that. But as a result of leaning away from activity and whatnot, I went through a pretty dramatic transformation that wasn't the best for my health. I gained a fair amount of weight. This coincided with some difficult things that were happening in my personal life at the time with my family. And so by the time that I got to college, I really was faced with a reality that I not only didn't feel comfortable in my body, but I didn't feel comfortable as a person. And so I took it upon myself at that time to make some pretty drastic changes that really changed the trajectory of my adult life.
Yeah. And a lot of people struggle with family stuff and being bullied and body image stuff. And I know a lot of that, at least from hearing you share your story on your own podcast, that really impacted you. I mean, because at that age, it's an age where you're always like taking other people's opinions in and you're trying to fit in, you're trying to be with the cool crowd, and any like little negative thing towards you, you take as this massive insult because you're just trying to be happy and like exist in school. Talk a bit about like the bullying and people kind of making fun of you and talking about you. How did that really shape your identity of how you saw yourself?
Yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard as a teenager to walk through the cafeteria and feel like there was a table of young men saying things about me behind my back. There were moments where I felt as though I didn't have much self-worth because I was letting those outside voices determine the trajectory, the tone of my inside voice, right? And now I have the understanding that I get to respond to the things that other people say. And just because I have a thought doesn't mean that that thought is fact, right? But at the time, as a teenager, I certainly didn't have that understanding. And so it was really challenging and really sad. And it is certainly something that really tested me at times.
I can't imagine. I mean, I was bullied a lot in school as well. And, I often get asked the question, like, is there anything that somebody could have told you back in the day that would have made you not take things so personally from other kids? And I'm like, you could say all the cliche stuff that you see in the self-help world now, but when you're like 14, like, do you really want to hear like the way somebody treats you as a reflection of them? Like, are you really going to take that in? Probably not. You're just like, I want to be able to go to the cafeteria and just sit down without having to worry about somebody saying something to me or for me, having something thrown at you or whatever it was. And it's like, unless you've been bullied, you just don't understand.
Yeah. And I think at the time, everything that didn't go my way, or not being able to get a date for the senior prom, in my head, it was all because of what I looked like, because that was what I was made to feel. I was made to feel that I didn't have value in my environment because I looked a certain way, because I was tipping the scales at a number that was, according to, the powers that be, obese, right? And so that was really, really difficult for me.
And so you're in college, at this point, you've gained a bunch of weight, and then you end up stepping on the scale, and it was like your make or break moment. You weighed over 200 pounds, I think.
Yeah.
Talk about like what was going on in your mind then. Like, how were you feeling about yourself? What ended up sparking the transformation for you to begin to start moving your body and changing your life?
Yeah. So the moment you're talking about, I was working on a term paper, I think spring semester of my freshman year. And I decided that a great way to procrastinate was facing what I already knew. And I knew that I was in a place in my body that I really didn't feel comfortable. I knew that my weight had gotten a little bit out of control. And I want to make sure that before I continue, I premise this by saying that in my body at that time, I was not healthy at that weight. I do believe that, numbers are a tough thing to talk about. And I also believe that there is a way for someone in a different body to be completely healthy at over 200 pounds. But for me, on my frame at that point, I was not healthy. And so I stepped on that scale and saw a number over 200 pounds and had this, what I refer to now as a hurdle moment, in which I threw on a high school volleyball sweatshirt and some cotton leggings and a pair of sneakers and ran down the 4 flights of stairs out of my dorm, down the street, running toward this area that we called Horse Barn Hill at the University of Connecticut. And I probably made it less than 15 seconds total before I truly collapsed in the grass below me. And I remember it being so wet with dew and looking up at the sky and thinking to myself, this isn't the life that I want. And it wasn't just the number, but the number represented, so much discomfort that I needed to not only be honest with myself that I was feeling, but also truly do something about. And so starting the next day, I made a commitment to take steps for my betterment, to take steps that would help me feel good in my body. And that was truly the goal. I knew that I wanted to lose weight, but when I think back to the goal that I set, not the smartest, if we're going to use that acronym here, but truly, I just wanted to feel better in my body. And that framing, I believe, is truly really important when we talk about goal setting. You're setting goals that have a positive thing that you're looking for instead of something negative, a negative connotation, something that you want to lose. So I wanted to feel better in my body. And I did that in 2 different phases. The first phase was learning how to eat better, maybe not eat the unbelievable banana chocolate chip ice cream from the dairy bar every day. And the second phase was learning to love running, which was something that, as I explained to you at the top of this, I was made to feel like I could never excel at and that I shouldn't be doing. But I was determined. And I truly believe that where there's a why, there's a way. And I had such a strong why to wanting to feel better in my body.
And before we get into like the story of how you built up your endurance and ended up running your first half marathon, which I think is incredibly fascinating and useful for people to understand when it comes to transformation, you've interviewed some of the most accomplished people on your podcast, some people that are high performers, top level athletes, and you've learned a lot yourself. If you were speaking to the Emily back then, knowing what you know now when you were first getting started, what would be a few like lessons you would share with her that can help mitigate, some of the self-induced adversity?
I think there's two things that are really resonating with me lately. The first one I have been repeating and repeating and repeating, and it is, you are made for this moment. I, in my life right now, feel like things are quite chaotic, but also so much of the hard work that I've been putting in is truly starting to pay off. And when you're in alignment, and for a little bit of background, I'm also a certified professional coach now, which you can liken to a life coach. And so we talk a lot about alignment and what that looks like. And when you're in alignment, the things that are for you come a little bit easier. You're working in a way that your life doesn't feel like you're constantly trudging uphill. And although there are difficulties in my day to day, it feels as though the things that are happening right now are supposed to be happening. And so in the moments where it does feel a little muddy, I keep telling myself, you are made for this moment. You are capable of handling whatever is going to be thrown at you, and that whatever is thrown at you is for you. And so if I could tell myself during those hard moments back when I was just going through the thick of the mundane and not necessarily enjoying every step of the process, I would remind myself that you are made for this moment, which is indicative of that you are capable of handling all of the hurdles that arise. And the other thing that I would tell myself is, the journey is the destination, or patience is the path. I know these are like a little punny, a little gimmicky, whatever you call it, but it's so true, right? Is that if you don't enjoy the journey, then the destination won't be as sweet. And for me, there are so many things that people do when they're on a journey to better their health. And some of them are less than desirable, right? You may not want to go to the gym for 45 minutes, 3 days a week. You may not want to be running. Again, I told you I didn't feel as though I was good at it. But when I look back at that time, I think about how I started to discover joy in the things that I chose to use as tools to get me to where I wanted to be. And so I opted out of doing things at that time, like strength training, which now brings me so much joy. But at that time, I felt incapable and like there was so much unknown. And so, okay, you don't like strength training? Well, what's another way that you can move your body that brings you joy? And so I learned in this pursuit of a better self that you can enjoy the journey to get to where you want to be. And then it does make that destination so much sweeter. And I did mention the word patience. So much patience is required, and patience is truly the path. And when you can be patient with yourself and embrace the fact that good things take time, then that good thing at that destination is going to be better than you even anticipated.
So a lot of people, I think, struggle with the fact that they've been engaging in so many unhealthy behaviors for years. And then it's like hard for them to just flip the switch and say, you know what, like, I'm not going to look back at this part of my life. I'm going to just move forward with this new healthy version of me, because their brain is just wired for something completely different. And a lot of people, like you talked about the importance of patience, and a lot of people, they lack patience when it comes to health transformation. It's like, okay, if I can't lose the 50 pounds in a month, what's the point? If I can't run the marathon in 2 months, what's the point? As somebody, you were young, you were in college, like, and you're at this stage where it's easy to be tempted by parties and eating a bunch of unhealthy food and hanging around with the wrong crowd. Like, how did you stay so laser focused and disciplined during that time of your life, and being able to go from the person that collapsed in the grass to like running your first half marathon? What was that process like?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Doug. And I think I can attribute it to a few things. The first thing I will say is pay attention to who you surround yourself with. Even to this day, I am extremely conscious of who's on my board of directors, let's call it. I have people on my board of directors that I admire the hell out of. These people not only are extraordinary in the things that they do, but they also inspire me to be my best self. And so I believe that in college, I really solidified and made some very strong bonds that supported me in my pursuits, knowing how important they were to me. And that is a point that I really want to drive home, because the people that truly care about you and your well-being and your personal betterment and the things that are important to you are going to support you in the quest of those things rather than deter you because it might be more convenient for them. They will not deter you because it might be more convenient for them. And especially at that age, oh my gosh, so many people, parties, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, I knew what made sense for me. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I didn't do that stuff. Of course I did that stuff. But I was able to find a balance that worked for me at that time. And candidly, some of the habits that I developed in college are still cornerstones of my habits today. I am an early morning person. And I know that I need to set boundaries around what feels good for me, maybe the night before, so that I can get up and do what I want to do the next day to set myself up for the best scenario possible. Which means yesterday, when a good friend of mine asked me if I wanted to grab dinner at 7:45, I said, I'm totally down for dinner at 7:45 as long as you know that I am leaving by 9:15. You have to establish the boundary that feels right for you so that you know the next day you deserve that type of self-compassion, self-love. You deserve that boundary, right? And so I will say first, yes, that board of directors, being cognizant of who surrounds you, setting boundaries is super important. And then when it comes to patience, you have to think of your goal and look at it in smaller deliverables, let's say. I knew I wanted to lose weight. I knew I wanted to feel better in my body, but I also knew that if I didn't set smaller goals along the way to the broader goal, that it wasn't going to feel as enjoyable of a journey. And so these were things like, as I developed my relationship with running a 5K, or maybe I knew that after losing X amount of weight, I was going to treat myself to a new pair of jeans, or I knew that if I felt as though I was being good with the way that I managed my portions and was really filling my plate with lots of vegetables and nourishing foods, that come the end of the month, I would look forward to booking an overnight with a girlfriend somewhere that we've been wanting to visit, right? So many different things. I believe that the small goals really do set you up for broader success.
And what was the process like early on? I'm curious. 'Cause for me, when I got into running, I was in jail and there was no track to measure your distance. There was no, pedometer. There was no Apple Watches back then. And there's literally a perimeter around the tables inside of the common area of the jail. And the way I would track my progress was I would have a deck of cards in my left hand. And every time I would take a lap, whether it was running or whether it was walking at the beginning or running towards the end, I would move a card from my left hand to my right hand to track, how many laps I would do. And that kind of gave me, is minute as it seems, a metric that I could continue to shoot for each day. And then for me, what really worked was thinking about all the people that bullied me as a kid every time I wanted to give up early on, because I was like, you know what, I'm going to prove these people wrong. I had this massive chip on my shoulder, which frankly didn't come off until my mid 20s. So I'm curious, what was that early process like for you from the initial day of running to the 5K for, winning that battle?
I love that card trick. That's a really good one. I also didn't have any way to measure the distance when I was on my feet. At the time, I did not have any sort of a wearable or a running watch. I would just run down this winding road in Madison, Connecticut, where the summer that I developed this relationship with running, I was working at an overnight camp. And so the only way for me to move my body was really to go running. It felt like the easiest, slowest barrier to entry, despite me not feeling as though I could ever be good at it. And so I would go out on this winding road and I would run to a certain tree and I would turn around. And I don't know, or I can't really recall why I believed that this route was a mile, but I was convinced, right? Because it took me 14 or 15 minutes. I did it every day after lunch at the same time. I took all of the decision fatigue out of it, which meant that I knew exactly what I was going to wear. I think I had 10 pairs of the exact same cotton Target leggings and 2 different packs of white Hanes V-necks from Walmart. and I wore the same sneakers and I just did the exact same thing every day, listening to the exact same playlist. And to your point about the cards, I think the playlist and the music was the thing that kept me going when I didn't really feel like being out there. And I always told myself that it's just 15 minutes. Like it's literally 15 minutes in your entire day. You know, we hear it all the time. Like, are you going to let one bad minute make for a bad day? I knew that I could last those 15 minutes and then the rest of the day was mine for the taking and that I would be better for it. And so it began with that, what I thought was 1 mile every day for an entire summer. I believe it was 62 days of consecutive running. And in that time period, I not only really started to be so proud of myself, but I was definitely getting closer to the person that I want to be and developed so much more self-confidence and so much assurance in what I was capable of just because I dedicated that energy to those 15 minutes. And at the end of that summer, I measured the route with my car and learned that it was actually only a half mile that I was running. Now, I can't tell you, Doug, how in that I can walk a half mile in 15 minutes. So I don't really know what was going on out there, but I didn't care. And to this day, I don't care because that route, that decision, that investment in myself enabled me to get over the hurdle that was, I'm never going to be good at running, allowed me to throw that story that I was telling myself to the curb and embrace this thing that actually was really fulfilling. It really made me feel capable. It made me feel excited. And it was helping me feel better in my body. It was helping lessen those narratives of negative self-talk that were on repeat, on loop for so long. And after that summer, the half mile slowly became a mile. The mile slowly became a 5K. I believe I started running, let's say, in the summer of 2012. I don't have a dateline here, but I want to say maybe I ran my first half marathon in 2013.
Yeah. And let's get into that story around the half marathon because I think it's an important one. And I think it's an important milestone in your transformation. You had trained for this half marathon. I think you had like found a program on the internet or something from a guy that was very trusted. And you're like super set to run this half marathon. And then one of your like good friends that died of a drug overdose. And I think it's an important moment because it goes back to the beginning, like you talked about not making the volleyball team. Knowing what you know now, you could have gone a different path with that. And I think a lot of people, when they hit this roadblock, like the overdose with your friend, they would be like, well, I guess this half marathon is just not meant to be for me right now. And then that could lead down another path of destruction. They could go and, use substances or whatever to like numb the pain of, having somebody close to them die. Talk about that moment for you and why it was so pivotal and what helped you persevere during that time.
It's one of those moments that I look back on and realize that I made a decision that I didn't realize at the time was really wise beyond where I was, candidly. I hadn't gone to any sort of therapy. I hadn't, had the access to so many of the tools that I have now in my mid-30s. But I remember that it was the week before the half marathon that I had trained for so diligently. And early in the morning, I got a call at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning from one of my dear friends that had graduated the year before. And I was like, what's going on? And he told me that our friend was in the hospital and they had found him unconscious in his room at his house. I, the next day, packed up all of my stuff and drove out to Long Island from Storrs, Connecticut and stayed with my dear friend. And I don't even remember if I made it to Long Island before we got the news that he passed. And I remember the wake was maybe 2 days later or 3 days later. I think it was on Thursday or Friday. And I left the wake and made the decision to not go to the funeral and drive back to Storrs. And I did it because I knew that my friend Matt would have wanted that for me. And it was devastating and such an emotional time to reflect back on. I remember I did what any good sorority girl would do. And I went to Walmart and I made a t-shirt and I wrote his name on the t-shirt and I wore that t-shirt in my first half marathon. And fast forward to the next few races that I would run in Hartford, Connecticut, I raised money for a scholarship fund in his name and I dedicated a part of my process to this person that inspired me to keep going when stuff got hard, right? And so that was a really special moment for me personally to cross that half marathon off of candidly, it was never on the bucket list, right? But became a goal that I had set for myself. So to be able to accomplish that goal and do it in a way that I knew like he would have felt really proud. I was proud that I showed up for myself too.
That's an amazing story. And it's really cool to hear that you found the silver lining in such a devastating moment and used it like as fuel, if you will, to, get you to finish that first half marathon. And now that's led you to running many marathons, and you're going to the Olympics, next week, I think. I'm out in Paris. And
Doug, you say that like I'm going to the Olympics to run the marathon.
yeah, but you're still going to I think it's still like but if you think about where you were at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the Emily of 2003 and your mindset and your like identity and how you viewed yourself and your habits. And then to say you're going to like the most epic sporting event in the world. You know what I mean? I just think that in and of itself is incredibly inspiring. I mean, no matter if you're running in it or just going to it. I mean, it's amazing.
I think candidly, if I didn't develop a vested interest in health and wellness personally within college, then I definitely would have taken a different trajectory when it came to my ultimate career path, being a journalist, working in digital and print, and then now segueing into a contributing writer and podcasting, hosting, all of the many things that I do today. And so I decided along my career journey to go the route of being a fitness editor. And then because I wanted to create smart fact-based content, decided to get all of these different certifications, from being a certified trainer and a run coach to nutrition. And then, as I mentioned, being a certified professional coach, which we can liken to a life coach. And so I did all of that because in the summer of 2012, I decided to invest in myself, right? I did all of that. I'm literally sitting where I am today because I made the conscious choice that I was worthy of my own investment. And so that choice not only got me down this career path, but ultimately, as you said, it's got me to go to the Olympics and record on the ground in Paris.
I always tell people if they want to change their life, the first thing they should do is focus on their health and fitness, because it's such a catalyst and there's a domino effect that comes from that. And I have my own insights that I've shared on why. I'm interested to hear, like, you from your own experience and everything that you've learned throughout the last 12 years or so. Why do you think, health and fitness has such this ripple effect on transformation?
Health and fitness, moving your body, prioritizing your own well-being, it involves habits, and habits work best when they're stacked, right? We know this. We know the benefit of habit stacking. I have a slew of habits that I stack in my morning routine, from making my cup of coffee to doing breath work to journaling to making my bed to go straight into my workout. And by investing in myself first thing in the day, I feel more capable to handle anything that comes my way, and in turn, show up for myself. Yes. Show up in a way that I'm proud of, show up in a way that involves me responding instead of reacting, but then also being capable to be someone that other people can rely on, to also be capable to show up for the people that I care about, both, the people that land in my inbox and then also my friends, my family. And so I believe that the way that I carry myself every single day, the woman that I've become, is because I've made the conscious choice to invest in myself, and specifically to invest in my health and well-being. And that also, it reminds me that I am capable. And I think that that is so important. Whether it is health and fitness or it's something else, doing something that challenges you regularly is a way to strengthen your overall being. We hear it all the time. How does a muscle strengthen, right? You give it something to push up against. Well, your will strengthens when you give it something to push up against. I once had a woman named Natalie Kuhn on the show, and she shared that with me. And it's always been so resonant that difficult moments, adversity, frustrating times, all of these things happen, and they might not feel good in the moment, but you don't grow from getting everything that you want. You grow from going through the mud, from overcoming the hurdles that come your way. And so for me, going back to your question about how health and wellness really is the cornerstone for so many good habits, so much good in our lives, I couldn't agree more.
Other than losing the weight and starting this running journey, what were some of the other biggest mental challenges you had to overcome in your journey?
Candidly, like I said, I had some really nasty self-talk. I had Bex Gentry from Peloton on the show today, and her and I were chatting about how we both went through times where if you were to put the way that we spoke to ourselves on a loudspeaker, it would be absolutely mortifying. Like if someone spoke to you this way that was in your circle, in your friend group, like you would literally leave the friend group immediately, right? And so for me, working on that negative self-talk really kind of came toward the end of that physical journey when I first started talking to my first therapist. And then, did a lot of work to understand and unpack a lot of the difficult traumas that I went through, as I mentioned, during my teenage years, and understand truly holistically that I am so worthy, period, of both the energy that I put into myself physically, of the time that I want to take for myself, of good relationships, of good people, of good energy, like so many things, right? And that understanding really came through doing a lot of talk therapy, a lot of journaling, a lot of writing, a lot of reflection, and a lot of meeting myself with where I was at. Because for so many years, especially going through college, I didn't want to recognize what was. I wanted to avoid it. I wanted to flee it. I didn't want to recognize or accept my feelings. I thought that if I didn't confront my feelings, then they weren't really happening, right? But what is true is that if you want to change, the first thing that needs to happen is you need to be honest with where you're at in this moment. And so getting to a place where I could more regularly confront how I was feeling and being honest about how I was feeling was absolutely critical for me to work on that negative self-talk and then cultivate a stronger and better sense of inner dialogue moving forward.
After all these years of reflection and therapy and doing all this work and talking to people, what do you think were some of the hardest, like, negative emotions and thoughts that you were avoiding when you were younger?
Oh man, it goes back to that like feeling of a lack of self-worth being in a certain body. To this day, I think it is so important for me to be honest about how I feel and understand that those feelings aren't because of the physical, knowing that I have worth regardless of my size. And understanding the power in that statement, and also understanding that I have this opportunity to share those sentiments with other women. And we talked about, the negative thoughts. And if you were to broadcast those, how detrimental they could be. I never want someone to question that they have worth as they are, ever. And so it's been really important for me to land on that and to work on that negative thought pattern that I had from when I was younger. I would also say that it was really challenging for me to understand when I was younger that I did have so much more control than I realized, right? It feels like when you don't have an understanding that things are happening to you. But in actuality, you can then reframe that and understand that something might be happening that's less than desirable, but then you have the opportunity to take control and figure out what you want to do with it. And so getting out of like the why is this happening to me victim mindset, really negative energy, was something that took a lot of years of work. And candidly, I really started to understand that power of the reframe when I did my coaching certification last year.
I'm interested to get your thoughts on this as well. Like, one of the hardest things for me in my healing journey was, I guess now they call it body dysmorphia. I didn't really know what it was, back in my 20s when I lost a bunch of weight, lost a bunch of body fat, changed my life. I still saw the old me in the mirror for a long time. And when people would pay me compliments about how I looked, I was so used to being insulted growing up that I couldn't accept them like authentically. Like, I was like, I used to get that I looked like Mark Wahlberg a lot. And I initially thought that was an insult because of the things that were said to me so often. And I tell the story frequently. When I was younger, I was so convinced I was still like the old version of me. And I had literally had to write down on a piece of paper who I was, after my transformation, who I was before, to like see fully that I was different, and that I actually had changed. I know other people struggle with this in different flavors. Did you ever have any challenges with body dysmorphia and seeing yourself in a different way?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I can really relate to the struggle there. Certainly body dysmorphia. And it was really triggering for me after I lost a ton of weight to then like do things like go back in my hometown and like see the way that people reacted to me differently than they did when I was younger. That was really uncomfortable for me. And I decided at that time, like, to maybe stop putting myself in situations that would make me feel like my worth had changed because I was smaller. I really didn't enjoy that. Certainly body dysmorphia. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I still deal with it like to this day, right? But I know things to be true. And sometimes I do this when anxieties come up. Specifically, the most recent, I did this. I hosted a large event for Strava called Camp Strava a few months ago. And I was going to be on stage in front of 500 people, and not like 500 strangers, like many people who I know that I respect in my industry. And they were all going to be in the same room. And I was in charge of like leading the entire day's events, right? And I sat down the morning of this major hosting opportunity and I wrote down what I know to be true. I did an I am list, and it included all of these statements that I knew were fact. I am good at speaking in front of big groups of people. I am a qualified expert in this industry. I am prepared and have all of the materials I need today. Like, just going down what I know is true. And I can do the exact same thing when it comes to my sense of self-worth and who I am and the beauty that I have to offer. And I can write down statements like, I am very strong. I love my collarbones. I feel sexy when I wear X, right? Like a list of whatever you want to put down. And these I am statements, they crush what we like to call the gremlin, which is the source of that negative self-talk, the source of that body dysmorphia, the thing that makes you feel like you are lesser than, that's piping up when all you want to do is focus on the good. It says, no, you shouldn't be happy now. Let me creep in and annoy you for a minute, right? And so when I experience to this day these negative thoughts surrounding what I look like, I have an understanding that I am so much more than the negative thoughts that are creeping in, and that regardless of what I look like, I have so much to bring to the table. And I would encourage anyone else who struggles with body dysmorphia to make one of those I am lists and recognize all of the amazing attributes that you have, not only physically, but emotionally as well.
Have you, in the last few years, have you had any other like big hurdle moments that stack up to the one you had when you were younger?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge I faced was probably in the beginning of maybe 2022 or 2023. I've lost my entire life timeline. But basically, I believe in the January of 2023, I navigated some pretty severe depression. I felt as though my feelings and my thoughts were not my own. I am extremely self-motivated and someone who really, not only busy, because I don't like the word busy, but like I've got like a time item to-do list. I like to like work hard, and I would sit down at my desk and feel like completely incapable of doing things that once felt exciting and brought me so much joy. And I remember that I walked into my living room one evening and I went to get a pot out from under the stove to make dinner. And it caused like a cascade of all of the pots, and they all fell out. And I just collapsed to the floor, like hysterically crying. And I was just like, it was a very similar experience to what I had experienced in college. And I was like, I need to make a change. Like, something is up and it feels bigger than me. I'm very fortunate that one of my closest and dearest friends is a doctor. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, like, I need to talk to you as like both my best friend and a doctor. And I talked to her about how I was feeling. And she was like, this is definitely something that you should talk to a local physician about. She's in a different state. And I think maybe like in that conversation, it might be something to explore if you're interested in medication for this. And I admittedly was really scared to go on SSRIs. I felt like it was almost as though like I couldn't do it on my own. But candidly, once I did get in to see a doctor, which had so many hurdles that we won't get into now, and then started on this medication, within 2 weeks, I felt like I was capable again. I felt like I was myself again. I felt like I was proud of who I was again. And it was really transformational for me to then get to this place where not only could I say like, wow, what a powerful tool. I'm so grateful, but then like get back to that productive nature that I knew that I had within me and just feel better in my body. And so I believe I was on those. This must have been the January of 2022 because I've been off of them for some time now. So I've been off of them for, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 months at this point. I feel the same capable that I like to feel. I feel entirely myself. And I know that at that time they were a tool that I reached for that I'm so grateful exists. And to anyone else who is going through a journey of their own navigating depression, I would say that it's available to you, but maybe it's not right for you. It's all a personal exploration. I would liken depression in a way that Neka Agumake once shared with me, which is that you're in a room, in your bedroom, and you're looking at the window and the curtains are drawn and you know the sun is outside, but you are incapable of opening the curtains yourself. And that is exactly how I felt. And so to anyone who's experiencing something like that, that might be watching or listening to this, I would just say that know that you're not alone in how you feel. And also that there is help out there for you, whether or not you want to go the route of medication.
Thanks for sharing all that. I know it's tough to talk about stuff like this, not just the depression, but also like going on medication. I know there can be a lot of like shame that comes with that, given especially like the industry that we're in, where you're like, you think that because you're in the self-help space and you host a podcast and you're always learning and you're super healthy, that you should be able to figure everything out on your own. And it's just not the case. Like you're going to need help along the way at different points of your life. I'm curious, anything habit-wise changed for you after you came off the medication to kind of maybe help prevent yourself from falling into a deep depression again?
I don't know if anything habit wise necessarily changed for me. I think my habits really did stick the same throughout that entire journey. I will say that the entire time I was working with a life coach of my own. And I know that having that regular touch point of speaking to my experience was really, really beneficial. And then beyond that, like I said, meeting myself with where I'm at and being honest. I remember in the week after I had like a really hectic day and I got worried at the end of the day when I was feeling some kind of way. I was like, oh my gosh, is this because I'm like reducing the dosage of my SSRIs? And then I had a moment and I just sat there and I was like, no, like you had a hard day. Like people have hard days, right? And so having grace with myself was really important. Working with a physician to make sure as I decided to make this change that I was doing so responsibly and did not just like one day stop taking my medication. There was some sort of a weaning process. And so I think that being honest with myself, having again that really solid board of directors, and then also going off of it accordingly, all of that really helped me in that transition.
Going back to friendships and relationships, what I really relate to what you shared about that as well. Like when I went to go back and hang out with my old friends after I got out of jail and it changed my life, it was almost like being on an awkward first date that like just there was no chemistry, no connection, because what my interests and their interests were now completely different. And I say this quote a lot and it's gone. I mean, it's been shared a bunch. And I say that you got to spend time with people who have common futures and not common past. And I say that because a lot of people get stuck spending time with the same people because they went to high school with them, or because they were in a fraternity with them or a sorority, or because they worked with them at one point. And they end up limiting themselves because they're trying to change and make this transformation. And the people around them subconsciously, indirectly are pulling them back based on their habits that you're now picking up on. What advice do you have for people that are listening to or watching this? Like, how do you know if it's time to let friends go? And then like, how do you make new friends? Because I think that's one of the biggest fears as well.
Adult friendships are hard. They're really hard. It's not like you are put into a room with 30 people and you have to spend your hour of recess with these 30 other kids, right? When you're an adult, you have to make an effort. And so to the first part of your question, when do you know if it's time to move on? I ask you to answer the question, how does this relationship make you feel? And there is no shame in realizing that maybe you've outgrown a relationship. There's no shame in being honest when there is someone in your life that doesn't feel like they can be your cheerleader. These are important things when you ask yourself, who do I want in my circle? Life's too short to be in things because you feel as though you should be in things. It's too short. And so when it comes to then making new friends, I would encourage you to explore the people that share your mutual interests. Run clubs are getting a lot of flack right now for so many different reasons, but they are a really good place to meet other people, like-minded people, determined people who also crave that feeling of feeling confident in their body. So if running is something that you're interested in, a run club is a really accessible way to meet other people in your area. But if running's not your thing, that's okay. Like, go to a pottery making class, try new things. And I think this is also something that's really awesome, right? Is that your like mission of maybe making new friends can also be unified and intertwined with a mission to try new things. Trying new experiences with new people is an automatic way to bond with someone over a likened connection, right? And so trying new things and meeting new people is a really great way to meet friends. And then also like friends of friends are really great options. So I have friends that live in different places, and then maybe they know someone that's moving to the city and they suggest that the two of us get together, and wham, bam, now I have a new friend, right? So again, it really goes back to being honest with yourself about what it is that you want in your relationships and your friendships. And you have to be willing to put yourself out there as well. And I say that if you're going to go into a new scenario, maybe you're going to some sort of a meetup, maybe you're trying out a new like restaurant, bar, like be where your feet are. If you want to make new friends, energy attracts like energy. So if you go into a space and you're head down, staring at your phone, not really putting out the vibes that you want to meet anyone in the place that you're at, well, guess what? You're not going to meet anyone in the place that you're at. So remember, energy attracts like energy. If you want a new friend, be open in the space that you're in to creating and cultivating new relationships, conversation, and so on.
No doubt. And I think a lot of it comes down to feeling capable, feeling competent and confident when doing so. And I know from hearing your journey, you talked about like a big part of your transformation was overcoming the feeling of feeling incapable. You talked about how you felt incapable to run. You talked about feeling incapable in other areas of your life. I know you hosted that event with Strava, which was a big challenge for you. Anything else come to mind recently where you were feeling incapable or like not enough or a bit of an imposter when doing something, but you did it anyway and you felt better?
I mean, candidly, I feel like sometimes I show up in everyday life and I'm like, you just got to put your big girl pants on, right? When it comes to large scale events, I mean, I really have this understanding now that there are going to be anxieties that come hand in hand with what I do, especially because so much of it is putting myself out there, being vocal and being a voice and being an outlet for others. And that can be a little disconcerting. There's a lot of moments where it's like, why me? But I go back to those I am statements. I go back to what I know to be true, and I root how I show up in those statements, and it helps me. I will say that, in November, I'm partnering with Team Milk and Every Woman's Marathon. It's a huge all women's marathon, 7,000 plus runners, first time in Savannah. And I'm going to be going down there and doing programming and running goal setting workshops and hosting live conversations on stage. And I'm so amped for this opportunity. But when you make an announcement like that, you're like, I'm going to go do this thing. And sure, there might be people that are feeling some kind of way. There might be people that are like, why is she doing this thing? Like, I could have done this thing. And that says more about that person than it does say anything about me, right? And so I come back to the I am statements. I come back to what I know to be true. I come back to why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is this broader mission of helping other women feel less alone in their own personal health journeys to live healthier and happier, more motivated lives. And I know that when the imposter syndrome seeps in, I come back to my purpose and standing firm, and that I have great things to offer everyone who wants to listen.
I know you have this strong purpose, like you just said, with helping women. And I bet, given where you live in New York, like there's flooded with people that are on their health journey. And I would imagine you've had a bunch of women come up to you over the years and talk about how much you've inspired them or how your message has impacted them. What's been like the most meaningful interaction you've had with a listener or a fan?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny because the unexpected hurdlers really make like a really big impact on me. And there's this man, Mike, that is a huge hurdler. And Mike reached out to me last year in the middle of the year to let me know that his wife and him used to listen to Hurdle together and she passed. And that because of the podcast, Mike started running And running really brought him back to himself after losing his wife. After sharing that beautiful story with me and giving me all of the feels, later that year, I had an event at MoMA PS1. It was a forum on runner safety, actually. And Mike messaged me and told me that he'd be coming. And meeting Mike was like, it was a once in a lifetime moment to like see this man and someone who like is so not the typical hurdler. Like the typical hurdler is like between 21 and 40, female, like lives in a major metro city. And then I've got like this man that's older than my father that tells me about the impact that I've made on him. And how lucky am I? What a reminder that you never know who's listening. You never know who you have the opportunity to help. And it doesn't matter if you consider yourself some sort of an influencer or not. We are each a person of influence for everyone around us. And it is up to you to responsibly ask yourself, what is it that I want to put into the world? Who do I want to be? And am I proud of myself with the way that I talk to myself, with the way that I talk to myself at the end of the day? That is so important when it comes to showing up every single day for the people that we're going to come into contact with.
What a story. That's amazing. You're right.
Oh,
It's like
Mike.
unexpected blessings.
Mike Murphy, the best.
Mike Murphy. I love that. It's a beautiful story. So what's next for you? I mean, we touched on the Olympics, and I know you're like focused on your own personal journey and the branding and stuff. Like, what are you excited about in the next couple of years?
My gosh, the next couple of years. I think there's a lot that I want to do. I mentioned the facilitation work and goal setting, and I feel very purposeful about the opportunity to bring individuals together in community. And so I'm working on some broader ideas of how to do that more regularly, providing an opportunity for conversation, connection, and movement specifically for women within hopefully something launching in 2025, maybe. Beyond that, I just love the opportunity to sit on stage and host things. I think it's so fun. It's so fun for me to cultivate conversations in front of groups. And then understandably, that's why I love doing what I do on the podcast, but being able to do it for some of the biggest moment in sport feels really exciting. So if there's an instance where we are talking about how we can support women, how we can uplift women, and of course, aligning with my passions of movement, then like call me, I'm there. Like I would love to figure out how to collaborate and level up whatever event is on the horizon.
Speaking of lifting up women, last question I have for you is, imagine you're talking to like the Emily at your lowest low, like back in the day, and you had just 2 minutes with her to like get her off of the couch and like somewhere else. What are you saying to her?
You just have to start. And starting can be so intimidating, understandably so. But there is so much goodness for you on the other side of your comfort zone. There is so much goodness for you on the other side of your comfort zone. So if you start and if you garner that courage, then I can promise you that not only will you be rewarded, but it will inspire you to continue to work hard, to continue to push forward and get you to dreams that you aren't even brave enough to dream yet.
I love it. Well, Emily, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your vulnerability. Appreciate you sharing the story. My audience, I think, is going to get a lot of value out of this conversation. If they want to listen to the pod, if they want to follow along with you on social media, where's the best place to do that?
So you can find Hurdle wherever you listen to this podcast, I am sure. Like I said on the show, Wellness Focus podcast, where I talk to everyone from top athletes to industry leaders and CEOs about their highest, toughest moments and best practice tips to help you live healthier, happier, more motivated lives. Hurdle's over on social at Hurdle Podcast. I am over on all the socials at Emily Abbate. That's Abbate. And I think that kind of caps it off.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Emily, for coming on the podcast. Like I said, I think my audience is going to really enjoy this one.
Thanks, Doug. So appreciative.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.